This is a hard one for me. I think, I said in the beginning, like how much I sat and I went along with a lot of things, early where I do very much wish that, I'd spoken up. And I, I will actually admit I carry a lot of guilt in some ways about not trying to make certain environments more, like I said, psychologically safe for future women. I realized how much that silence becomes complicity, as you go along. And, as much as my silence at the time was survival, like it was an unknown form of survival. So that was hard.
Hello, Molly here on the Say It Skillfully podcast with leaders, entrepreneurs, artists, elite athletes, and professionals like you who open up about defining moments, what's been hard, and what they've learned in finding their true north and success on their terms. My guest today has had a life of operating where stakes are high, margins razor thin, and leadership isn't theoretical. It's lived at speed. From growing up on a fifth-generation farm to being one of Canada's first 5 female fighter pilots, she's not only flown fighter jets, but also shaped the next generation of pilots. Hers is a story, one of resilience, precision, and quietly breaking barriers. She's led in environments where trust is everything, inspired people through humor and humanity, and proven that strength and empathy are not opposites. Her career spans the cockpit, command, and global policy, always grounded in service, mentorship, and culture change. I am honored to host the extraordinary senior officer in the Royal Canadian Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel Riel Erickson. Riel, a warm welcome to Say It Skillfully.
Thank you so much.
It's so mortifying to have someone brag about you, right? And then you're like,
It can be very awkward.
Exactly. Well, my friend, there is nothing awkward about being BA, and we know what BA stands for. So one thing we're going to say, though, before we start is that everything that's going to be shared here is Riel's own opinions and experiences, and she's not speaking at all on behalf of the Canadian government. So we have to do a shout out to the International Women's Forum. Thank you, IWF, because Riel is one of the spectacular members of the most recent cohort. And this leadership development program I'm so indebted to it for meeting you and many other bright lights. And so maybe we could start with just a little bit of reflection, Riel, on that experience and, what it's meant to you so far. And you're really in the midst of it.
Yeah, you know what? It's been so amazing, humbling as well, as I've sat amongst some really amazing women, in my cohort. I remember showing up at the orientation and I think we all had this moment of insecurity where we looked around and we were like, why am I here amongst all these amazing people? But I do have to say it's been, one of the things that I've realized kind of through it and talking with the women and everything is having a level of validation, I think, of, like, yeah, I do belong here. Like, this is fair because, yeah. And I also never thought, I remember showing up there and also feeling so out of place amongst so many women, um, on the day one, and then just so instantly feeling like I was in a family, which was so incredible. Um, yeah, and I think everybody that was in the cohort has also, speaks about the fact that we showed up there, like everybody kind of not sure, and within hours we were sharing our most intimate, stories and everything. Like, talk about the power of vulnerability. It's like, and I since then, like, meeting other, alumni from the fellowship program, and all of us say the same thing, was just how rapidly you were like, I'm so exposed. And, but how amazing and powerful that can be. And it feels like already, as we're getting ready here shortly to head to INSEAD, kind of doing some of the work that, we've been asked to do, how much that's kind of continued of really digging into it yourself and reflecting on your own leadership. And it's been really eye-opening and exciting. Yeah.
That's so great. It's the biggest privilege ever to be with you all and just to see the eyes opening and the hearts growing and the people just feeling a little taller and standing in your own skin, and just also knowing that you are not alone.
Yeah, I think it's just you can see everybody kind of settle into themselves and, it's nice to be in that kind of environment, and particularly for somebody like me, where that's just it. You feel so out of place so often and constantly questioning whether you deserve to be there. Like, in as much as, like, cognitively, like, I've earned my place, it's hard sometimes to feel it in your heart. And in there, I think you could see that that was a common feeling we all had. And kind of finding that place and that confidence in each other, like, you could see everybody kind of just settling into that. Yeah.
It's super cool. And with that privilege of being part of that group comes that responsibility of that, leadership matters and how you lead and how other folks are leading. We want to raise the bar because, I've said this in the program that we're kind of in a leadership crisis of epic proportion in some ways. And I think it really takes true leaders grounded in themselves and what they see as a future, a bright future that really does unify and bring people together. And, that's good stuff. It's not easy,
Yeah.
but it's
It
really
is not
exciting.
easy. Yeah, that piece of, yeah, finding the humanity in ourselves and using that as your piece of strength, like, being human's not a weakness.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Exactly. Okay. So we have so many places to go. Yours is such an amazing path. So I would just be so grateful if you would share with our listeners, just start wherever you want to start, but just kind of, I don't know that you kind of were like, well, I think I'm going to be a fighter pilot at age 4, right? So we'd just love to have that story unfold for us. And then we'll kind of at some point make it to the present day.
Yeah. No, definitely. I started out, I joke around that I'm still trying to figure out what I wanna do when I grow up. Um, as every fighter pilot is, to be fair. Um, but, when I was in high school and I was looking at university, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I had so many paths that I was thinking about going into. Um, I loved learning, I loved challenges, I loved leadership as well, but one of the challenges I also had was paying for university. Um, I As I was applying to many, many universities, I looked at the Royal Military College. My uncle, went to the Royal Military College. He was a fighter pilot. He was in the 1st Gulf War, and I remember, oh man, I can't, like, probably being in about grade 7, him returning from the Gulf War. He'd fired the first Canadian shots, like, in war, like, as they say, in anger or whatever, but in war since the Korean War. So he's kind of this, at this time, this, war hero, I guess you could say. And it's a strong memory I had. Did I ever think like, "Oh, I wanna be like my uncle?" Like, no, not at all. Like, I was like, "Oh, just carrying on with life." But when I was looking at university, I knew that the Royal Military College had a really good education plan, and that if I joined, the military would pay for it. My uncle had really cool stories about being a pilot. So, that really was almost the reason that I applied. And I remember, when I had applied, I told my guidance counselor at the high school, and you gotta remember, like, at the time, like, I have always kind of been a people pleaser. Like, I perform high, that to a point, but at the same time, I've very much been a extremely independent, extremely autonomous, like, I I've never broken rules, but I always got so close to the edge of them that, I was like, I will just influence them or find a way to get an exception. Yeah, so my guidance counselor, when I had said that, "Hey, I've applied to the military college," I remember so vividly, like, the reaction she had was like, "Okay," like, and she never said like, "Oh, that's not for you," or anything like that, but I could very much see in her mind, she was like, "No. That's that's not gonna work." And it almost made me, because, again, as much as I'm a people pleaser, but I'm also have this rebellious side, and it's like, "You don't think I can do this?" Which, quite frankly, I remember it's what cemented it in my head that this is what I'm gonna do. And, um, I remember, showing up And I will tell you, my first, like, going out into basic training and then everything, I like, she was not wrong in her reaction. Going from somebody who, because like I said, I was responsible, was people pleaser, that nobody ever gave me rules almost. So, like, I never had, like, any hard rules that I had to follow. I was responsible. I never had a curfew in my entire life. To all of a sudden, like, I've got a curfew. I have extreme rules on how I can, like, make my bed, keep my room clean, what I was allowed to wear, how I was allowed to wear it was just such a culture shock. And also that level, like, of authority of, like, just do what you're told. Cause I'm one of those, I'm like, I need to intimately understand why. So that was hard. I understand, like, years later, you're like, okay, I kind of get this idea of, in leadership, like, need to be a good follower. But this is also the military, like, 25 plus years ago. So yeah, so it was really interesting. That first year was so hard. But I made such bonds with people, and that's where I think it was the people that kept me in the military. I realized that, the level of bonds when you go through those kind of challenges with somebody is just something that is, it can't be replicated anywhere else. So, it was the people that really was why I started staying, and then the values and the ethics and then the opportunity and leadership. But when I got to, actually, the ironic thing is when I got to pilot training was, very funny because, again, I'm still not 100% sold. I've never flown a plane, up until now. So I only know people who have flown planes. And when I went to my first pilot training, I was like, this is terrible. I was like, I detested it. I didn't like the training environment. I didn't like, I had hated that course so much. I was like, I want to be a pilot. Like, that was intimately, I had decided this. And, we do this training partway through university. So when I came back, I was like, I've got to figure out how to change trades. And at the time we had a pilot shortage, and they were like, too bad, like, you need to become a pilot. Military, again, since then, has kind of realized that when people don't want to do something, especially something super challenging, they're probably not going to be successful. Except for, I end up becoming a little bit of the exception to the rule, because I showed up there and everybody was like, you can't quit. So the only way to get out of this is to fail. And I'm like, well, I don't one, I've never failed anything in my entire life.
I'm
So
not starting now.
yeah, I was like, no, no, no. But I remember, like, failure was this out, though, for, like, it was kind of like, I'm like, failure is the outcome I want, but it's not something that is in me to try for. I'm like, I'm going to show up. I'm going to do the work, and, doing the work for me is doing it to the best of my ability. But this kind of moment was like this eye opening moment for me, because failure didn't have the same level of, like, consequences it used to like it normally has, because success wasn't tied to my identity anymore. And that was, like, the most freeing thing in the world, because when you made a mistake, like, you're trying your best, but when you made a mistake, which inevitably happens, you were like, okay, and I would just move on. And those mistakes weren't internalized as a piece of my identity, in those things. And it was so free. And, like, next thing, and the comments that kept coming back was like, wow, like, you just bounce back from everything. It's so great. Like, you don't seem that we see it. And later, I become an instructor. You see it. Somebody who this is their lifelong dream, they make a mistake and it just snowballs because they see it. They're like, this is all that exists right now is this one mistake. And I remember that. And I remember, as, my training went along, as, as soon as I started caring about that success was really important, the cost of failure was so high that it was inhibiting, to me. And it really became like a mantra when I started seeing that in myself, to be like, I need to embrace this idea of failure. So, that's kind of become like my other, this other mantra I have is, like, embrace failure. Like, failure is not like, you can't let it define you. You can't,
Yeah.
like, success can't define you. Failure can't define you. And That was a really key moment, I think, for me. I had to practice it a lot, since then and still do, because let's face it, like we identify our success ourselves so much with our successes, which you mentioned it's hard to listen to your biographies and people, you know, tout how wonderful you are, but this is just it. Our identities are tied so hard to, our successes. So freeing yourself from that and going like, oh yeah, but that failure doesn't define me was such a key moment for me. Yeah, so it was interesting. And then as I went along, what I realized in my training though was that it wasn't the flying that I didn't like. It had really been some of the training environment that I'd been in. I had a tough instructor that, again, didn't teach, just kind of barked at me and whatnot. And I realized like how important learning, like, a good and learning environment changes how we interact with what we're doing. And I suddenly realized like I really love flying actually. I love the challenge. I love, like when things started going faster and things got harder and like, and I had this aircraft, like the planes got bigger and all of a sudden I could go upside down and not feeling like I was flying a little lawnmower, trying to fly upside down. It was like, it was suddenly exciting and fun and like pulling G forces. And I was, and just the further I got into the training, I'm like, now that's what I wanna do. Like, I don't and I realized, I kind of thought of flying as I'm gonna sit in an airplane, and get from point A to point B, and that has never interested me. It was all the challenge, like the volume of information coming in, and that was fighter pilot flying, and I was like, "That's what I wanna do." So, that kind of, like, teed me up was you know, what I thought was the flying environment that was not it at all, and, yeah, I got really excited about that.
Okay, so I have to ask because so two things come to mind. First of all, way back when, I get that you have this great uncle who's the role model here, but you're signing up for the military. And what did your mom and dad say?
It's my parents have been so supportive. Like, I think as I was going through, it was like, "Oh, I wanna be a scientist. Oh, I wanna be a lawyer. Oh, I wanna be" like and they were so great of, like, anything that you wanna do, like, we're supportive. I honestly think I coulda told them, like, "I wanna be a janitor," and they would have been just as supportive, kind of when I think about it. Um, my mom and both my parents were super excited about it. They thought it was great. I realize now, after the fact, like I can recognize now, especially that I've become a parent, the moments of them going like, like of the worry that a parent has. And it's actually, I will say it was one of the things when I became a commanding officer at the training base, we do this ceremony where when a student graduates and gets their wings, they're promoted and we often have the parents or the family, be the one to put the new rank on. And one of the things that I would always talk about every time I did this, because, I said, and especially when it was like some 20-year-old, it's often the parents that are doing this, and I would say, like, it's so important for you to be a part of this because for those of us that joined the military, like, we're asked, like, you sign the thing, and the idea being is that I'm willing to give up, my life for my country. Nobody ever asked the parents, "Are you willing to give your kid for your country?" And so this, like, we talk about sacrifice all the time, but I've always been like, that's, like, probably one of the ultimate sacrifices, and, I get goosebumps even now because I realize now kind of my parents, like, how supportive they were knowing, and for pilot training too, because it's not even just like, "Oh, I might go to war," like, the training we do is not the safest training in the world, like so, yeah, so I'm to this day, I'm always amazed at how supportive they were and, and just and supportive through all of it. All of my times when I was like, this is not what I want to do, and them going, I can still remember my dad continuously saying, I just feel like everything's gonna work out, like and I would be
Easy for
so
you to
annoyed.
say.
No, I was so annoyed in the moments. I can remember times in the fighter pilot training as well, where I had moments where I was like, I am sure that this is not gonna work out for me, I really struggled at times there, and, uh, and again, and me trying to come back to that being okay with failure, and I remember him, I was like, "I need to get okay with it," and by that point, they were pretty proud and excited, and I was like, "You guys need to be okay with this," and he was like, we're good either way, but I just feel like everything's gonna work out." Drive me up the wall. Like, he was right.
so two things. One is self-doubt, one is fear. The self-doubt part, you mentioned self-doubt. So how did you get through those periods of time? Was it kind of on your own mushing through? Did you look to other people to help you overcome self-doubt?
It's a solid combination, I think, of the two. If I had not really looked in at myself, like, I never would have got through. I never could have got to the other side of self-doubt just on the shoulders of other people saying, "You got it," especially in a situation like fighter pilot training, where, nobody's gonna fix, like, do the thing in the airplane, for me. And there's nobody in that moment either there telling me that I'm gonna be okay. Um, in fact, often the opposite. As you have an instructor there once in a while telling you about your mistakes and how this could have killed somebody. Um, so yeah, those moments it really did come down to asking myself. And one of the things, and I know I've used this metaphor often actually throughout my life, was kind of trying to think back to those like the moments of like, why am I doubting myself? Like and it's hard because throughout my career there's always been somebody out there who, be it through envy, because here I did feel like I was taking something from somebody, because there were people out there who have dreamed of being a fighter pilot since they were 4 years old, and I was selected for it, the training, and not them. And I know countless times it was said, "Well, you only got selected because you are a woman." And, and I called those like the seeds of doubt that got planted. And so when things started getting hard, of me starting to doubt myself, of, you know, is this why I'm here? Do I not deserve it? But also knowing, like, and just having to sit there and go, I'm like, I'm tougher than I think. Like, and also going like, I'm never gonna know if I'm good enough unless I try. So, like, then those things, like, maybe I'm not good enough. But darn it, it's like, we're gonna prove this, because I'm not gonna quit. And I need, if I'm not gonna be good enough, I wanna know that for sure. And that it had to be my entire heart. And I can remember moments, like, I can actually remember after one flight where I really hit, like, the doubt, and I had a not so great experience with instructor, and and thinking, and and instructors had even admitted to me after, they're like, I made a mistake, like, I really kind of had written you off. And them actually, even like, this is after I've passed the course and everything, but them being like, admitting, like, they were surprised. But for me, I was like, you don't get to decide how I do before it happens. And that was my thing, was like, I don't get to decide what
Yeah.
the outcome is before it happens. And we're allowed to have doubt, but I can't let it control the next move. Like that, it's the whole, if we're scared, we do it scared. Um, if you have doubt, do it anyway. That's always kind of been how I went with stuff, because I truly did. I quickly started realizing that I have no idea what I'm capable of. So
Oh.
I can doubt myself all I want. I don't know. Like, that doubt means nothing.
That's incredibly wise, my friend. It's incredibly wise. I mean, it seems
Yeah.
sort of
Well,
so simple, but that's not an easy concept for people to get, much less internalize. That's
yeah, and
amazing.
I think that's the moment that, I realized, like, when things went, I had moments where I was sure things were gonna come out bad and they would come out good. And, like, those were those moments where, because I walked into it with a lot of doubt and came out the other side perfectly successful. And I was like, hey, I managed to do that despite the doubt. And so it just became, I was like, doubt doesn't determine outcome. And, it's something that, you have to regulate that doubt. And I was like, let's not dwell on it. Let's regulate it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's not ignoring it, it's not denying it, but it is managing, navigating it. Okay. So, what about the fear? I mean, it was because it is, yeah, everyone does things that could be life threatening, but that sort of is in another league, flying. And then, in military missions, I'm just curious, how does fear, how does the fear feel to you? And then how do you manage it?
I I think it's interesting because to me, I look at a lot of our emotions that we feel, and fear is no different. I mean, yes, okay, we're doing things that are dangerous, but to be honest, I realize that fear manifests whether it's, because you're physically in danger, if you're emotionally threatened, if your identity is being threatened, it manifests the same way. Your body has no idea the difference. For me, a lot of this stuff was just do it, like, again, just do it anyway, is sitting in that comfort and or discomfort, I should say, and learning to do the actions. And we, in the military, we talk about this all the time of this being, discipline is, sitting on that edge of discomfort of the I don't know, how things are going to turn out, and having that faith, like, in the training and having the faith in what you've done. The fact of the matter is, I think when I always looked at my training is, I it was such a controlled environment and there was so much going on is that I felt like I had more control over things doing that training than I did over sitting on the ground. Um, so, the if I can remember being, doing I've got an engineering degree and, and talking about risk management and everything. And they, when we got into certain stuff, they talk about voluntary risk versus involuntary risk. And, the tolerance that people have for voluntary risk is significantly higher. And I think that's the thing that a lot of fighter pilots have is we're like, this is our, like, yeah, okay, there's a risk, but I have control over that risk. So I think that's one thing is that there's a certain level of personality that's in there that does, you do have, you you can have doubt, but I guess underneath that, you still need the belief that my dad's belief that everything's just gonna be okay.
Amazing.
I guess I've harnessed his inner,
Yes,
uh
100%, 100%. So how just talk a bit about the career advancement, and I also am curious because there aren't that many female fighter pilots, period, and I just don't know the rest of the environment. Is it, you know, way predominantly men, and just kind of what it was like for you navigating?
yeah, it's interesting. My career path, since then, like, I was, I was on squadron, and then I became an instructor as well. I taught the fighter lead-in training. So sort of the, as I call them the baby fighter pilots. They've now learned to fly a plane. Now we teach them, to employ a plane as a weapon. So I taught that. I've also, taught the basic pilot training as well. Basically most of the way through your entire flying career for a fighter pilot, I've instructed right from those who have never flown before. By the way, far more terrifying taking somebody like putting your hands in somebody's like, or your life in somebody's hands who's never flown a plane before, far worse than any fighter pilot you've ever done. Because again, you don't have the control. But yeah, so it was interesting because there wasn't a lot of women when I was even going through pilot training. Got onto pilot training. I'm my personality is one I can fit in just about anywhere. In terms of what the environment, was like, it's such a deep bond that everybody has and like a deep trust that's formed that, it was really interesting. But at the same time, you are not the same as everybody else. Like, and there's just that little like, like the fish out of water, but I can breathe air. But it's just something feels like, a little, I don't know. And I think that was to be honest, I don't think I realized kind of the impact of some of the, the things that the environment of how much that being the fish out of water really did impact me of not having certain types of support, not having another female around to ask certain questions about, um, you know, and always, and I would not have been able to define this in the moment of the question of how safe you are in that environment, and I'm not even talking about physical safety or anything like that, but, like, psychological safety, like, not knowing, like, can I cry? Can I have an emotional moment? Can I be a woman? Can I, like, just, in those types of situations? And I will be honest too, like, it's, uh it's not unknown to anybody, kind of like the culture has, we've come a very long way from where we were 20 years ago. It wasn't the healthiest, I would say, of cultures, back in the early days. Um, and it's interesting because there's been a cognitive dissonance in my mind over that situation, even because, here I those the guys that I was on squadron with are some of the like I formed the deepest bonds with them. Like I would walk to the end of the earth for every single one of them. At the same time, I can sit there and say that the culture we had was incredibly unhealthy. And, that's hard to reconcile with at the end,
Mm.
as you go along because you're like, I don't understand how these two things can be true. And we talked about that is how can, I have felt so safe and so not safe, I guess, at the same time. Like just, because I trust them with my life, in every way, shape, and form, but I'm not comfortable at the same time. And constantly and I realized how much, part of that was, like, masking to fit in. Masking, of, like, what do I need to behave like to be seen as one of these individuals?
Uh-huh.
And not that it like, not that it's always, like, a terrible thing to kind of, try and fit in, but it becomes unhealthy and dissociative almost at a time. And, yeah, so and it's interesting in that because, like, that's just it, is how many of us actually spend our how much energy and effort is put into just trying to mask, for safety in an environment. I mean, a lot of the time we don't realize we're doing it until you're out of it. And that was kind of an eye-opening thing of how much I spend a lot of time now reflecting on how much, like, because we just learned. And then again, it comes back to right in my early days, right? Where you're expected to behave a certain way as you join the military, and you're like, "Okay, so I got like, for me to survive in this situation, I have to behave a certain way." You almost got conditioned for it,
Mhm.
and again, I go with it's a little bit of, like, trying to find the healthy part of, I need to go along to get along. There's a healthy aspect to it, but at what point does it flip over into, being unhealthy? And that's a thing in leadership, I think, that has been interesting for me to try and explore.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you and the bazillion others because you really, I think, nailed it. It's not all good or all bad. It's not all white or all black. And there's the gray. And how do we create structures and institutions and ways of working so that we can work well together while creating space for people to individually, be who they are and feel safe doing that. And I think it's much more nuanced now to be an effective leader, to quote unquote harness the diversity. Because if you're going to harness the diversity of all these different people, your ability to connect to many different people and to truly empathize and have them feel like you have a sense for them. I mean, those are high end skills. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Well, and I always say to folks, like being a fighter pilot, being in the military, it's anybody can do it, but it's not for everybody. And finding, like that's just it. Is this a anybody or an everybody thing? Because
yeah,
like
yeah. That's great.
that.
That's well put. That's a really great way to put it. How do you so you're in, kind of in the jet and then you're helping other people fly the jets. And so I'm just curious, career-wise, how does that look, as you move along?
Well, I'm still plotting that path. It's like I do often joke around, here I am, I'm a lieutenant colonel, like I just figured out how to get promoted to major. Uh, so no, but it's interesting because a lot of it's the learn to do the thing. My path has been learn to do the thing, teach others to do the thing. And I think that's, you'll never learn more than when you teach. Is often the stuff. But, as we go up, you move from a doer, to the okay, now I'm still doing, but I'm teaching other
Teaching.
people to do. And then you become the more of like, now I'm moving into this like manager piece. So I sadly am not doing as much. Like as a commanding officer, you don't get it's so busy. You kind of fly a little bit, but your opportunities to be in a cockpit become more and more scarce as you you move up and as you get into more of the strategic. So you're kind of moving from taking care of the people, taking care of taking care of the plane and the job, taking care of the people, and then taking care of the institution.
Mhm.
And, now I'm kind of moving into that taking care of the institution aspect of it. And it's interesting because all of that connects right back down to the people and the job. And, and it's trying to move up without losing the thread all the way back to the people and, and the task. And it's hard because it's so big and complex. So, yeah, so I'm moving into there where I'm hoping to shape the institution that shapes those things,
Yeah.
to have the influence over the broader picture, the bigger
Yeah.
impact.
I love it. I love it. Real, how talk to me about the personal life and how you wove that together. You got the kids. I mean, kind of sort of looks like you're doing it all.
Yeah, I do, I say often, like, I have it all, I just not all at once. I think I've heard many women, I think, describe it that way. I have 2, like, just wonderful, amazing boys, they're still quite young, 7 and 9 right now, 7.5. My one would be very like, "I'm 7.5." Because at that age, that half year is so important. Now I count by decades, but Um, but, it's I think the one thing I have realized too, though, like, much like even in, leadership and everything, like, nobody does anything alone. It's a team. Uh, we have our team at home. My husband is the absolute rock. When it came to leadership, like, in my career path, like, we sat down together and said, "How are we going to manage this?" And put down our non-negotiables, of like, okay, like one parent always has to be available for the children. Like, this is, um, and, it's, so it's interesting making sure that we always have that on our mind always is like, how are we negotiating this career as a team? Um, so that's really important. And I think the biggest thing is learning to say no, which is a very difficult thing, particularly for people pleasers. Um, and I'll admit, probably 20 years ago, that kind of thing would never have worked. Like, I remember showing up as a commanding officer, and I had a 2 and a 3.5-year-old at the time, and my boss said to me, like, "I don't know how you're going to do this. Like, I can't even imagine being like." He was a wing commander, and he's like, "I don't think I could have ever, been a commanding officer with a 2 and a 3.5-year-old." And I it was funny to me because 'cause I'm like, "Well, we're gonna do it.
Watch
Here we
me.
go." But I think the thing is that's just it, is leadership is learning that you can't be everything to everyone all the time. It's about picking and choosing what you can, and that level of responsibility of that, just it, I can't be everything to everyone. Like, I can't give everyone everything they want, but I will give everyone what they need, and determining the difference between the want and the need. That is that is a challenge. And like every parent knows, as the kid is standing in the checkout line screaming that they really want that, toy or that candy, we all know how hard it is to explain to them that they do not need that. It is it is very much that. I think that is often why I think women kind of do manage to do that, is we're so used to that screaming of wants and needs, and dealing with that, I think, is interesting. So, yeah, it's really determining, and learning that it's a give take. Like, my husband, I remember when we moved here, the job I had was a 16-hour a day job, and so it was like, "Okay, that's what we're doing." The job I got right after was like, "Nope, I'm gonna be home." Like, so we know that there's gonna be times where I'm gonna take, but there has to be times where, it's not that intense. So, I think this whole thing of, like, it's work-life integration, I think heard one time somebody say. Like, I love that so much more, and when I was working the 16-hour days, like, without doubt, like, I came home and it was me that put the kids to bed. Finding those things of like, here's my one moment, I will be present for it. And I think that's the thing that's what you need to do is that I can't do everything, but what I am gonna do, I'm gonna do it well.
Yeah. I mean, those are great learnings. Sometimes it takes us longer than not. Griel, mentors? I mean, because there's not maybe that many women doing what you're doing. I am curious, who did you seek counsel from? Who kind of put you under their wing?
So yeah, that I have been blessed with some really amazing mentors, both men and women. The female mentor that absolutely probably is one of the biggest reasons that I'm where I am today, was and I will actually say like Jamie Spicer Blanchette. She's currently the commander of the Royal Canadian Air Force. So I pick them well. It's just
Good lesson.
yeah, pick your mentors well. But I remember I had met her. I was a young second lieutenant, and we played volleyball together. She was a captain. I was a second lieutenant. So like I'm like brand new, like just been commissioned. She's still relatively young in her career. We played volleyball together. That was fine. As I got so then years later, as I'm now just promoted to a major, my husband and I, are getting married. We're wanting to start a family and there's talk about me being sort of talent managed or something. And I was like, I want to move up, but I was like, we're in the middle of starting this, like, I'm starting this family. And I think the question that a lot of women have, and I remember hearing this all the time because the thought went through my time all the is that if I want to have a family, I can't pursue a career because, or like that it's this either or false dichotomy that we live in, right? Is that you can't fully be present with a family and, a really great career, or at least that's this delusion we have, I think, when we're younger. Um, and knowing that, okay, if I want to get on this path where I'm gonna, be an up and comer, like how am I gonna do it? And I remember though hearing, because I'd kind of followed her afterwards that, here she was now a commanding officer and so we have one rank difference between us at the time. But I had remembered that just before when she was a major, that she had been pregnant, like with her third, while she was, like the military advisor to the Minister of Defense. So she was in this really high profile, high paced job, pregnant. And I was like, okay. And she had 3 kids, like, and she was moving up. And so I just decided that I would randomly like reach out to her. And I was like, I really need advice. And I just decided, like, I took a risk, like, "Hey, remember me from 5, 6 years ago? Are you willing to answer some questions for me?" And so I just came to her and I was like, I have all these questions about having a family, like, do I have to choose? What are the consequences? Like, and she was amazing. She was like, "Oh god, no, just, like, you can do it. You can do it. You can do it." And she just turned into one of the key people that I always went to with "I have a question, I don't know how to navigate," because I saw her, she was such an authentic person, like, she didn't necessarily fit completely the mold of, like, this is what leadership I could see myself in her, I in that ability to show a little bit of vulnerability, like, and not sacrifice her family, for this. Like, that was something that was really important to me, was that I didn't want to do this while sacrificing my relationship with my husband, my relationship with my kids. And, so she became, like, one of my core confidants, and I've seen her now, like, moving up through the ranks, and she's just always maintained that level of authenticity and self-reflection and, but wanting to do things her way, which is beautiful. And I love that. And even in my male, mentors, authenticity is the number one thing I always picked. Like
Yeah.
somebody that I could see myself in that shared the same values. And it was that has always been, and then never being afraid to ask for their help and advice. And I realize how many people out there, like, we don't want to bother them with our questions, like, and put them out. Like, that was one thing I really realized. I was like, and I've had this conversation with, her and stuff, and her saying, she's like, "No, like, please, like, please ask me these questions. Like, she gets as much out of it as I do. And, remember that. And I try and tell that to other people, like, don't be afraid to ask me for like help or advice. Like, you're not putting me out.
Right.
Because we don't want to put somebody out. And
Yeah.
asking for help is not putting somebody out. Like, it makes them feel valued.
100%. 100%. So the roles have switched. I'm sure you're mentoring people. Talk to me about what that's like for you having that kind of a role.
It's, you know, I I love it. I love people. I love connection. Like, connection to me is what makes the world go round. It's, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is nothing. Like, I'm sorry, like, we can have all the food in the world. If you don't have human connection, you will wither and die. So to me, like, that is what I live for. It's why I love leadership. So mentoring is like a huge aspect, I think, of who I am. Because to me, that's where legacies live, is what we learn from others and what we can pass on to others. Um, I've I just my biggest thing is I want people to realize their human potential, I think, and that they are more capable than they think. Like, I talked about in the thing is that my own self doubt meant nothing to what I was capable of, and I really want other people to know that. That has been my biggest thing I say to folks, as they come with these questions and you see that moment and of saying, I'm like, "Yeah, but you don't know. Like, you can be right or wrong. You have no idea. So there's only one way to find out
Right.
is, you know, uh, go do this and really trying to get folks to, again, like, not fear the failure. Because nothing inspires me more than watching somebody, like, when you see somebody, like, be it even when I was teaching, right? Like, watching somebody, that moment when things click, when something works that people didn't realize they could do. And, I think anything in sports, right? When it's like you finally make the basket,
Right.
you make that is one of the most rewarding feelings. And I love coaching. Like, I love seeing other people have that because, to me, I can get that achievement, but I can get it infinitely more times by working with somebody else. And that's how we're also going to make the world a better place. Like, I can only do so much, but if I can inspire 10 people to be amazing, like, it's like,
I love it.
I don't need to be
I
amazing.
love it. I love it. Well, you are amazing. So, one in particular aspect, when I first heard a little bit of your journey, you talked about um, kind of a moment where you kind of recognized what you could stand for people. And there's a little girl, I don't know if it was a parade. Do you remember this? Would you share with
Yeah.
folks? I thought that was the most inspiring.
Yeah. I remember, so I was brand new on squadron and we had traveled to this town, and we met a family at the airport, and this little girl, and she was about 7, she came out to see us, and we're all like, we all landed. We were a formation. We were going in for an air show. And the family knew a lot of the other guys on squadron because her father had passed away in a training accident. Um, and so all the other guys that we'd flown in with knew this family well. So we were saying hi at the airport, and I'm, you know, finishing up my stuff with the airplane, and this girl just kept staring at me with this like look of confusion or something of like, and it was very intense. And then as we came up and I heard her, as kids do, they ask in that, like, I'm being quiet, but they're like the really loud whisper, like, "Who is that?" You know? And her mom's like, "Oh, that's Guns," was my call sign. That's Guns, like, Riel. "Yeah, but why is she here? Like, what is she doing? Who is she?" She's like, she's a pilot, like a fighter pilot. Like, you saw her get out of the plane, like, just like your dad was. And I remember seeing, like, just this, like, paradigm shift in her. Like, "What?" And, and you can see, like, it just, even though she'd kind of known this environment forever, it never really occurred to her that a woman could be a fighter pilot. Like, it was just, and whether she kind of, maybe she believed it, but, like, seeing it was this, like, shift. And I think that was a moment for me that I realized the power, like, the power and the responsibility and, that I have to be visible which is hard. You say it's very hard because it feels like you're out there wanting attention. But, it's the same thing because years later, I'd mentioned a TV show came out about my fighter pilot training. And it was this 8-part series on Discovery Channel, and it was followed very closely here in Canada. It went to several other countries. And I remember, like, it was super popular here in Canada, and the number of women, like, I would be chased down in malls and stuff, and, like, girls from, like, 4 years old to, like, university to full-grown adults were just like, "I wanna be a fighter pilot." Like, and that was their biggest thing. They're like it never had occurred to them. They kinda had this image of a fighter pilot, which was, I'm sure, Top Gun. Uh, Maverick. And I think, as people did, like, this was just it. All of a sudden it was like, oh, like, long hair, the different, like, walking around with my pink water bottles as I always do, giggling. I have been known, I have a video of me giggling while I fired the gun for the first time in the F-18, like, giggled like a little schoolgirl. Yeah. And, like, I think that was just it. I realized, like, how important it's, like, it's hard to imagine things being different if you can't, that's just it, see it. And that power of visibility, like, I think there is a level of responsibility to actually be out and, and say, "This is what I've done, this is where I am," and be visible so that we get more women doing these kinds of things.
Yeah, it's amazing. Do you have this is a Say It Skillfully show, so do you have an example in the past as you were coming up the ranks, or maybe now, like a tough conversation where you remember you kind of dug deep and found your voice and spoke up, or maybe you didn't and you wish you did?
Yeah, and I this was kind of, um this is a hard one for me. I think, I said in the beginning, like how much I sat and I went along with a lot of things, early where I do very much wish that, I'd spoken up. And I I will actually admit I carry a lot of guilt in some ways about not trying to make certain environments more, like I said, psychologically safe for future women. I realized how much that silence becomes complicity, as you go along. And, as much as my silence at the time was survival, like it was an unknown form of survival. So that was hard. I did also realize because, the challenge is then now, like, I can remember when I finally did start speaking up about it and the backlash, and that's hard because, like, this is a hard one to, to sort of explain because I actually don't think like the backlash that I received was, it wasn't like, oh, we got to silence or we got to hide everything. It was much like anything is I don't understand. You never had an issue with this before. Like, why, why, like, so it felt like betrayal to a lot, I think, of folks. And it's taken a long time to slowly kind of figure out how to, like, say it skillfully of I'm not saying you guys were bad people. I'm just saying we didn't do it right. Um, and really starting to understand how much, like, I think this is a challenge that a lot of women who work in male dominated environments, like, struggle with is, certain behaviors that have kind of been tolerated and accepted for a long time, but trying to hold them accountable while giving grace to the fact that I'm not, like, you're not a bad person, like, good people do bad things. And this isn't a measure of your guys' integrity, but trying to bring them like, hey, we can both have like live the same things and have completely different experiences. But how do I explain that, you know, to you? Because it's a very difficult conversation to have. And I'm slowly learning to have those with some of my, like with friends, with leaders, with subordinates, of doing it in a way that from curiosity instead of the I'm right, you're wrong, and trying to understand of where because people they believe they're doing the right thing. It's the same thing with instruction. Like back in the day when I joined, like you got yelled at and told you were terrible and like sworn at all the time, but they really believed that was the right thing because you had to put people under stress, because we're going to go into war. And like, so like they're doing it with good intent, but it's like, hey, hindsight's 2020, and having, I also say, intent really matters in that it's the difference between murder and manslaughter. Like, it doesn't determine whether somebody's dead. It determines the sentence. So,
Right. Yeah.
and so I sit there and I say that I'm like, hey, but like, let's just talk about the fact that we need to acknowledge maybe some of the harm, and then we can talk about how we got here. That we were driving too fast, that we were,
Yeah.
um, and so I'm learning now. Like, I think that's a funny thing of approaching those really difficult conversations with curiosity, of understanding how somebody's seeing a situation and meeting them that way. Because if I can come at something with curiosity, it's not seen as one betrayal. Like, so I don't lose that trust, because my intent is never to say you were wrong, like you're a terrible person. Because I really truly believe nobody, like not nobody, but 99% of the world acts with the best intentions. And, the easiest way to get along is like, how can I understand where you were acting from so that we can come to the same realization of where we need to move forward from? And that is a skill I'm still working on.
Well, you join the club, honey. I think everybody
Yeah.
is. And I love um, the way you're approaching it and really recognizing how other people might interpret something, how we're landing in a way that we may not intend. How do we open the door so that people are receptive before we even say it?
Yeah.
And I think those things are really, those are all fundamental to the whole say it skillfully capability. So we'll have
Yeah. I
more
think
on that.
we need to validate people's experiences from both sides. And, if we can do that and say, like, yeah, like your experience is real, like my experience is real, but let's figure out, like, how they now intertwine. And
Yeah.
that it's the challenge for sure.
Yeah. That is our accurate shared reality that we are hoping to create the
Yeah.
best outcomes. Okay, we could go on and on. Let me bring this home for a wrap. So, some fun stuff here. Hobbies. Real. What hobbies do you have?
Oh my goodness, I collect hobbies like some people collect coffee mugs, so I'm not gonna lie. Uh, but,
Love it.
probably my longest lasting hobby at the moment is, I actually make handbags. I sew handbags. And yeah, and so it's a weird little thing. Like, I've knit and stuff, but my handbag, I love to make handbags because, 1, they're useful, 2, it fits my engineering brain. And you get something at the end, which is my dopamine hit. I believe in the holy trinity of shopping, which is shoes, handbags, and accessories. So I fit now that I get to shop for the parts. It's the ultimate Lego, but I will say my favorite part about it often now is I try to give them away to women's shelters and stuff, because, that's, yeah. So,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
that's just it. You get to gift it. A useful
That's
thing.
super win. That's super win-win.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to define introvert and extrovert. Introvert is derives energy from within. Extrovert derives energy from outside. Which are you?
So it's funny. I heard something that was like ambivert, which is what I want to say, which is it really depends. But yes, probably introvert. But there are moments when I have a deep connection with somebody else or with a group. I love that. But I also need my time with me. If I don't have that, I will wither and die. But
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I don't think of it an index of sociability and whether we like being with people, but I'm that way. I actually use the elevator test. Would you rather be in an elevator than by yourself? Would you rather be in an elevator with a bunch of people?
Yeah. I like that. But again, I was like, I love to be in the elevator facing the wrong way and having that weird, awkward conversation with somebody that you like really connect with them. But if you have to make it small talk, then I want to be by myself.
Yeah,
So that's what I said.
exactly.
I'm like, it
That's it.
has to have
That's
the connection.
that's right. I got it. I got it. Okay, what might the folks who even know you pretty well, your friends, what might they find surprising about you?
Well, that's always a good one. And I know you always ask this, and because I've been watching this podcast, and um, yeah, they're. I'm a big Taylor Swift fan, which people are starting to figure out. They're starting to figure out as her latest album, I sing all the time, but it's a newer. Yep, most people would not
Yes.
have guessed that.
I cannot guess that. I love that. I love that. Okay, a wrap. If we had, you are exactly where you are, okay? But if you had a do-over, right? What might that be in your life?
Oh, This has always been such a hard question for me because with a do-over, I wouldn't be who I am. So, like all those big things, like, so that's such a hard thing for me. But if I had one do-over, I know I would have stuck with playing a musical instrument longer. I actually a little bit regret. And I played the accordion, and I would even stick with the accordion. I'm now starting to try and learn the piano, but yeah, it was like a totally dorky thing when I was a kid, but now, like, everything that's dorky is super cool. So
Cool.
I would love to play the accordion, but I wish I'd stuck with it. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, in life or work, your biggest accomplishment?
Becoming a fighter pilot. I want to say something cheesy like getting married and having my kids, and don't get me wrong, like they were amazing, but becoming a fighter pilot, because that was the one that was the most surprising to me.
Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, rapid fire. If you weren't a fighter pilot or instructing people to become fighter pilots, what profession would you be in your next life?
A research cognitive behavioral, like a clinical, like cognitive behavioral person. Like I
Oh,
want to research people.
totally.
People fascinate me. I would love to like just sit in a fishbowl and watch them I don't want to say like manipulate because that's terrible, but the experiments of like putting somebody in where that's just it, they face the wrong way in the elevator or like the stuff like how humans behave in weird situations just fascinates me. I want to be a person that does that research and
Yeah, I
creates those situations.
could totally see that. I could totally see that. Okay, names,
Well, guns, that was my call sign
call
as
sign.
yeah. So that's pretty much the only nickname I ever really. Yeah.
That's great. That's so great. And your favorite food or cuisine?
Yes, I love all food. It's
Yes.
yes, favorite food. Yes. Love food.
Good. We love foods. Okay, so you've said a lot. You shared you're very generous with what you shared. If you take yourself out of it and look in, what's a top takeaway from what you heard yourself say today?
I I'm like, what did I say today? So much I've blacked out. Uh, um, I'll say this a million times is like nobody knows what they're capable of. Like I believe that with all my heart. Like whether you can envision yourself doing something or not, like you don't know. So I'm always like, just try. Like it's the greatest gift you can give to yourself is to go see if you do fail.
Totally. Okay, my friend, what was it like for you to share your journey with us today?
It was really great. It was like it's always interesting to be reflective on your life and everything and do I don't it's so funny because I don't want to sound like, like you're bragging or something, but I do have these moments because it is sort of nice to realize that you're like, yeah, I have done a lot. Like I do have things to share. It's and I love being able to share with people. So I have to say I'm so grateful for the opportunity that you've given me to do that here. Because I really hope that it does, something there clicks with somebody that they go and be courageous and do something, even if they don't think they can, just to find out. And yeah, it's always nice to have a moment to, take all your experiences and share them and hope that somebody else can learn and grow.
Yeah, well, I don't think you have to hope. I know that people are, and I want to appreciate you for showing us how to lead with your whole heart, um, and how you inspire yourself and all of us to not doubt ourselves and to consider what's possible. And for sure, Riel, you are part of the solution, right? You're helping us all be safe, seen, and heard, and our true and our very, very best selves. So you inspire me in so many ways. If I can be helpful in any teeny weeny way, I am here for you. And I hope that our paths will cross again very soon.
Oh, I know they will, obviously, and I'm desperate to keep this connection alive.
Yeah, well, that's two of us. You take good care. Hopefully, we'll see you soon.
Yes.
Ciao. Bye. Okay. Riel flies high, and let me tell you, she is lifting up all those fortunate to be around her, and she is using her voice skillfully and creating the collective environment for everyone to win. So I want to help everyone do the same. I've got my best-selling book with my co-author, Marshall Goldsmith. SayItSkillfully.com has all sorts of resources for you, including my Say It Skillfully 101 training program to help you and your colleagues all fly. So one final thought, and it is a favorite from our friend Riel. That which doesn't kill you makes a great story, my friends. And that is a wrap. Thanks for joining us. Please be part of the solution and kindly share this show. Amplify Riel's voice, reflect on your own top takeaways, and know I am cheering for you to be who you are and say what needs to be said skillfully so that you and those around you have that accurate shared reality that makes work and life so much better.
Say It Skillfully is finding your authentic voice and knowing how and when best to use it with confidence, clarity, and impact. Most communication and personal development preach playing the game so you win. Say It Skillfully teaches you how to change the game so relationships strengthen, performance improves, and everyone wins.